What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Scouting Combine. I know I've been off the last couple weeks, and as some of you guys know, I've been going through a hard time, but finally, I'm back to talk some college ball with y'all. Today, I have a great friend of mine here today to talk about the 2023 quarterbacks you guys should be watching for the 2023 NFL Draft. Today, we have Mark Schofield here. Mark, how you doing, my guy?
I'm doing well, Hussam. It is great to be with you, buddy. Excited to dive in. We are into the start of August. We had the Hall of Fame game on Thursday night, which means basically football is back. At the college level, you've got teams opening up camps now. Teams are putting on the pads at the college level too. So it's a good time of year. Football is in the air, and it's always a fun time when I'm with you, buddy.
Football is in the air. College football is back. Kickoffs on August 27th. And, we watched a little bit of Trayvon Walker and Chad Move play a couple of snaps, their first ever snaps in the NFL. So it was really, really good to watch them and evaluate them. But today we'll be evaluating arguably the most important position in all of football, and it is the quarterbacks. How are you feeling about today's show, Mark?
I'm really excited, and there's a lot of excitement about this draft class. And
of course, and we'll go ahead and get started off with probably the biggest star of this class, and the hot name right now, Alabama's Bryce Young, who's coming off a Heisman season, and he's looking to build off of that. As he's regarded one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, making throws out of the pocket and out of structure. He led the Tide to win an SEC championship game and beating that vaunted Georgia defense last season that had Trayvon Walker, Channing Tindall, Darion Kendrick as well. He threw 26 passes, for 421 yards and 3 touchdowns. What do you think of Bryce Young as a quarterback prospect?
He's extremely talented. One of the things that I really appreciate about his game is kind of, and this is going to be a common theme, I think, with the guys we're going to talk about today, the mental side. You can see examples of him, particularly in the SEC championship against Georgia, sort of reading and reacting to a defense that really sort of tests you. And what was impressive about his game against Georgia, particularly, the SEC championship game, but even in the national championship game, he made some scholarship throws. That old Carl Scott phrase, like force them to make the scholarship throw, the 7, the deep corner and things like that. He had one in the national championship game, the second quarter, like the 12:35 mark, where he's going to throw the deep corner route from right hash to left sideline, inside leverage defender, and he puts it exactly where it needs to be. There's also examples of him working through reads, getting to the second to third read on a play. Extended plays, not just with his legs, like you mentioned, he's very good outside the pocket and off of structure, but extended plays with his mind in a sense, because when those first couple of reads aren't there, you've got to get deep into your progression, and he's able to do that. So very talented player. I mean, I think, the biggest question on him might be the size factor. He's built more like a slot receiver than what we've typically seen at the quarterback position. But as you and I both know, and the listeners and viewers know, the league's trending in a different direction. You're seeing guys that are a little bit smaller. Kyler Murray, for example, get drafted as early as first overall. And so provided he has another solid year, he's certainly in the mix for that QB1 spot and potentially the first overall pick.
And let's go ahead and take a look at this play. 3rd and 18 against the Auburn Tigers quarterbacks itself. It's about the anticipation and touch at the level which make you, I believe, as an elite NFL quarterback. And I think just those 2 traits himself that he showed in that video, it makes him one of the top quarterbacks in the nation and my number 1 quarterback in this 2023 watch list.
Yeah, you're right there, Hussam, on some of the traits you really look for to separate elite quarterbacks. And anticipation is certainly one of those. It's often the difference between being a good quarterback and a great one. But what I really like about the clip that you showed there is what he does mechanically, what he does structurally, because he's kind of sliding to his left a little bit. And you see at the last second before he lets that go, he gets that front left shoulder pointed to the target. When you're a right-handed quarterback moving to your left, there are times when you get a little bit lazy. You don't get that front shoulder pointed square at the target. That's when balls, when you're throwing while moving that way, will tend to, dip. They'll dip a little bit. They'll lose velocity. They'll hang in the air a little bit. But by getting that front shoulder pointed out, and it's something I work on with quarterbacks all the time, you're going to get more velocity on it. And the fact that he does that, I think, speaks to his technique, his, obviously the work that he's put in, and it bodes well for what he's going to do down the road. It tells me that it's an extremely coachable quarterback, and it's something that I'm sure NFL teams would love to get their hands on.
Do you think he could have back-to-back Heisman winning seasons?
I mean, absolutely. I think certainly the potential is there. I mean, we know Alabama, typically they don't rebuild, they reload. They've got a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. We expect them to be in the thick of things in the SEC and perhaps beyond. If they make another deep playoff run to another, playoff appearance and potentially a national championship game, it stands to reason that he'll be in the mix. Now, I think his teammate on the defensive side of the ball might have something to say about that. I said Will Anderson should have been in New York City for the Heisman Trophy ceremony last year. I think he was the best defensive player in football. I think he was the best player in football last year. I was stunned. I understand that Aiden Hutchinson had a very good year, but by almost all of the sort of defensive metrics, Anderson was right up there with him, if not even better. Now, look, Hutchinson had sort of a statement game at the end against Ohio State, so I get it. But I think, Young will be in the mix, but it wouldn't surprise me if his teammate there is as well.
And, his teammate, Will Anderson, he looks to be within that top 5, top 3 pick within the 2023
Depending who's picking first, he could be one. I mean,
he definitely could be one. As we move on to another quarterback, we talked about Ohio State already in C.J. Stroud, and I believe he's one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in this class. I know we're shifting towards getting away from completion percentage. Looking as a stat, it's more so about completion percentage over expected. But he completed 72% of his passes in 2022, and he's going to look to build off what he did in that Rose Bowl game against Utah. He's accurate. He's aggressive. He's willing to attack the middle of the field, and he reads the field extremely well as a passer. Like, I know you and I have talked a little bit about fib formation and boundary a little bit, while something Coach Hartline spoke to me about. And when I watched his film from the beginning of the season towards the end of the season, there was a shift in his progressions, in the way that he read defenses. It almost felt like it clicked for him. So what do you think slowed down for him to make it click?
I think it was just some sort of a more – with reps, with experience, you get a better feel of what you're seeing with your eyes and then trust in that when you make a decision. And you just, that's a great example of the play that you're going to show right there. We could talk about that in a second, but perhaps one of my favorite examples really was, a touchdown, one of the 35 touchdowns he threw against, Michigan State. It was 5 or something like that, but it felt like 35. And it was a play, I think it was, early, I think might've been his first touchdown of the game to Olave, where they got a 3-by-1. They got back to his left. Back goes fast to the flat to the left. Quarters, middle of the field, open look in the secondary for Michigan State, which you tend to expect to see from Michigan State. But the way he moved that backside safety with his eyes to get him to move a little bit, to create space, to throw that safety splitter to Olave, a really good job with his eyes. And like you said, very comfortable attacking the middle of the field. He had 66 explosive plays to his credit last year. That's both throw it and running, but he had 18 explosive plays attacking the middle of the field from 10 yards downfield and between the hash marks. And so that stands out to me as a quarterback willing to attack the middle field, like you said. A lot of times college quarterbacks coming out, They're not asked to do it. They don't do it a ton.
They do either to the flats, to the screens, to the short side.
And everything's outside the numbers, right? Everything's outside the numbers. His willingness, and Young too, to both of their credit, their willingness to attack the middle of the field is huge for them going forward.
Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this play. I was just astounded to see what he actually does. And you can go ahead. I'll slow it down just a little bit and I'll replay it. Why don't you go ahead and, break this down a little bit for us, because I see single high coverage right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example of sort of quarterback read and out of rotation, right? Because you see that sort of single high look, and then they explode right at the snap where – you've got that guy that looks like the post safety in the middle of the field. He bails. They've got the guy that looks like he's a slot defender down in the alley to the weak side here. Actually, I guess it's technically you could say it's a strong side because you get the tight end in the back to that side. So it looks like he's going to be down maybe as a sort of curl flat defender, a hook defender, maybe a buzz defender. He bails out too. So you go from that single high look pre-snap to that 2-high look right at the snap. And what does he do? Reads it out perfectly. You got that bender coming from the slot on the right to JSN, who's also going to be in the mix for wide receiver 1. And he hits him on stride. And this is sort of, when you see static looks pre and post snap and a quarterback can pick them apart, like, yeah, that's your job. You're supposed to be able to do that. But, the upper level, the sort of, master's level of quarterback play is when you get this sort of pre-snap look, right? Where it's like, yeah, this is okay. This is going to be single high. You're expected to read it out one way. He's probably thinking, look, he's going to read this to the left side. He's going to that vertical route on the outside and then the back to the flat and the tight end under. That's probably what he's thinking. But no, it's actually the too high look. So you've got to then get your guys backside, your eyes backside to JSN, read that out, hit him in stride, and that's exactly what he did.
So we have a question from Alex and one of our listeners and followers. How do you guys feel about the linebacker pass coverage? And I'll pass this question off to you, Mark.
On this play specifically?
Yeah, this play specifically.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example of Devin Lloyd, right? Right there in the middle of the field. Very, very talented player, one of my favorite linebackers in it. He kind of takes the cheese a little bit. He's expecting that Stroud's going to sort of get to that. He's going to stay front side here, that three-man concept. You can see him sort of try to get into his throwing lane to that side. That coupled with Stroud's eyes sort of influences Lloyd to really bail out that way. And it creates sort of that huge window, right? I understand where Lloyd's trying to get underneath that, but by doing that and Stroud's eyes, again, very good with his eyes, he's able to create that throwing lane. And then that front side linebacker, I think, needs to do a better job of colliding and sort of sticking on that a little bit, giving his safeties a little bit of help, because if he's running that bender as a linebacker, that weak side linebacker, that slot defender there, you've got to carry that a little bit better. Like, he's just kind of like running around out there, not really rerouted him, not really sinking under too much. Everything front side is working away from you. You don't see that outside, that one to the weak side coming under right away. You can play a little bit more patient there and sort of collide with that, carry that a little bit more, and give your safety some help.
Of course. Now, look, he's a smart signal caller, natural reader, great instincts, and the ability to quickly cycle through his reads. And this was his first full season. What does year two look like for CJ Stroud when he has Marvin Harrison Jr. and arguably one of the top wide receivers in JSN coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should reasonably expect more big numbers from him. I mean, 72% completion percentage. I don't know if you get there. I mean, that's a whopping number, but 44 touchdowns. I think you could do that again. Only threw the 6 interceptions last year. I think the explosive plays, the 66 we created both through the air and on the ground, you expect to see that as well. I see no reason to think that he's not going to be in the mix for a Heisman, that he's not going to be in the mix, or Ohio State's not going to be in the mix, for a national, for at least the Big Ten championship. And so I have high expectations for Stroud. Like, I know I told you I haven't ranked these guys, but I've got Stroud 1A and Young 1B. I mean, they're both tremendous talents at the position.
As we move on from Columbus, Ohio, we go to sunny South Florida as we talk about University of Miami quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. I mean, there's a lot of excitement around the Hurricanes this season, mainly in part to new head coach Mario Cristobal. But Tyler Van Dyke's play last season is another big reason for that excitement. In 2021, he played in 10 games, almost 3,000 yards with 330 attempts, a completion percentage of 62%, and 9 yards per pass. We haven't seen competent quarterback play for the Miami Hurricanes since Ken Dorsey.
Yeah.
I guess since you want to say. He earned ACC Rookie of the Year and ACC Offensive Rookie of the Year honors. And, what do you think about Tyler Van Dyke overall, since he came in relief for an injured De'Ara King?
I got to say, I was very impressed when I studied him this summer. Because I didn't see a ton of Miami live. And obviously, look, when you get into the draft cycle, I'm so glad this is one of the plays I was hoping you would highlight. And I was so impressed studying it. And you mentioned it when Nate talks about anticipation there. It's exactly right. Like, you got this divide concept, and he lets this go as the receiver has even just started to get into his break. Now, it's a great example of sort of understanding the coverage, getting his eyes to the concept and attacking the middle of the field with this route and with this throw. But you see when he lets this go, I mean, ball's coming out right there. And the receiver is just getting into his break when the ball is already out of his hands. And so very impressive anticipation for a younger quarterback. I love his deep accuracy. He showed some really good pocket movement skills. Now, he had some, redshirt freshman moments. Like he had the pick six against Georgia Tech, the sort of classic blunder where you're rolling to your right, you throw late over the middle down in the red zone, and it goes the other way for 6. There are some moments where he needs to sort of speed things up with his mind. But like I talked about earlier with some of the other guys, more reps, more experience, more games, more opportunities to diagnose defenses with your mind, you're going to get that stuff cleaned up. The sky, I think, is the limit for this kid. With what we saw last year, I could understand the excitement of Miami. I think you're on mute.
Oh, I am. I think this is a great example of TVD, just him seeing the field and throwing with anticipation. And he hits that post route for the touchdown on a switch concept. He just lets the ball fly. And his processing skills just speak, for himself. He uses good technique, squares his shoulder to the target, and really steps into his throws. And, he's my third-ring quarterback prospect this year. Now, we're going to move on to somebody who's has a little bit of an unusual taste for coffee.
He does.
Kentucky's Will Levis puts mayo in his coffee. Have you ever heard of that before?
I've never heard of that. I don't understand it. I will give credit. My buddy Trevor Sikkema, his fiance, Alyssa Lang, she put the mayo in her coffee recently. I think it was last year when she was interviewing him. To her credit, she was able to choke it down. I don't understand and it's not like a little drop, kids. It's like full on, squeeze it all in, couple of tablespoons, like pretty rough. But, another enticing prospect. And interestingly, another guy, all these guys we talked about, comfortable attack in the middle of the field, which again, we usually don't see. And you see it here. There are a number of examples from the bowl game against Iowa. You see it here, play action, reset in the pocket, attack in the middle of the field earlier. Here, play action, reset in the pocket, throwing that deep corner route. He does a lot of stuff under center, play action concepts. I think NFL teams are going to really like to see that about him. Are there moments where he's a little bit late with his eyes? Yeah. There are moments where he's perhaps a little bit greedy, like he had an interception in week 12 where, forced one into double coverage. Probably should have done something else with the football, but there are times where he gets a little bit greedy, but still very intriguing prospect.
Now, look, he offers a fantastic blend of size, arm strength, toughness. He has a good feel to climb and avoid pressure, kind of like, in this play, and he extended it with his legs. Just for me personally, when I look at his ball placement, I see it as a bit of an issue, and I think it comes more so from his lower body mechanics, maybe just some inconsistencies that he needs to clean up. But, he's got a wicked fast release. Processing skills are really, really fast. And when you take a look at how he plays, it brings me back to the 3-by-1 11 personnel that the Rams ran in 2019 under Sean McVay. I feel like he may possibly be a guy that could fit the new Minnesota Vikings offense with Kevin O'Connell running it.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And I think you're right from a mechanical standpoint. I really like mechanically from the waist up. I think from the waist down, particularly from the knees down, there's a bit of, like you said, inconsistency. There are times when he'll click and climb and he's very fluid on the balls of his feet. There are other times where it's a bit more static and choppy down there. And that does lead, I think, or at least contribute to, some of that message, that placement inconsistency that you're talking about. As far as the fit, I love that idea and that sort of system where we're seeing more teams, there's talk in New England that they're moving in that sort of Shanahan, McVay direction in terms of an offensive philosophy, more and more teams. And obviously KOC in Minnesota is going to do that. I think that's a very good fit for him. I think that's sort of ideal. And, we all know what Kirk Cousins is and is not as a quarterback. And if Minnesota decides to address the position at some point, he would be a good fit.
Calling my shot, you heard it here first. If Will Levis goes to the Minnesota Vikings, you got to credit me right here. Before we keep continuing with our show, guys, if you have not already, make sure you guys register on PrizePicks. The code is 5. Use it. You get a 100% match on your deposit. Again, the code is 5. We'll go off to my 5th-rated quarterback. It is not somebody a lot of people know. Tanner McKee from Stanford. I mean, in his first year at Stanford, he showed a handful of traits. I mean, he's got elite size. He's 6'6", 230 pounds, and has the arm to match it all. I mean, his accuracy is decent, but his best trait is his ball placement as well. Like his accuracy shows on the short time routes to the running backs, the wide receivers, and he places it in front of the receiver to lead them to potential yards after the catch. And I think this play really, really highlights it here, where NFL teams are just going to ooze for the talent this kid has.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a couple of good things that are really working in his favor right now. And I think the ball placement skills are chief among them. I mean, the ability to put the ball where it needs to be, what it needs to be there, it certainly stands out. And he does it to all levels of the field. It's not just in the 0 to 10 range. It's 10 to 19. It's 20 plus. And this play is another good example of a quarterback sort of, again, using his eyes a bit, gets his eyes on 3 that's coming over the middle. So the linebacker sort of carries that a little bit. That expands the window to then attack 2, who's working up the seam. And that's not just some sort of like, that's a talented linebacker who might get his name called in the first round that you're sort of moving there with his eyes. Penny Sewell's little brother there, Noah Sewell. So he's a very talented quarterback, very aggressive, like you said, not afraid to challenge windows at all levels of the field. I'd like to see a little bit more from him from an arm talent standpoint. Like I think there are some throws where he tried to really push it downfield with the ball hunt a little bit, but that's something, again, you get another sort of season under your belt. You expect to see more in that regard. Mechanically, a little bit of an elongated delivery at times. There are times when he'll have the dip and a loop to it. You see a little bit of there, but still a relatively quick release even with that. And so I think that's something that until you see him missing throws because of mechanics, the ball is late because of mechanics, you don't really worry about it. You just kind of put a pin in your ear with it and track it. Talented player. I got to say, I'm happy to see him on your top 5. I think that's a nice call. I think he's somebody that could rise. I mean, we do this every summer now, right? We're looking for the next Kenny Pickett, the next Mitchell Trubisky, the next Joe Burrow, the next guy that's going to sort of rise here. McKee might be the one.
Right. He's definitely an intriguing pro prospect due to his obvious intangible, but we'll go ahead and cap it off with the last 2 quarterbacks. I haven't necessarily put in my top 5, but as honorable mentions, Phil Jurkovec from Boston College and Anthony Richardson from the University of Florida. Give me a 2-minute quick hitter on both of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, we just got done talking about, hey, looking for the guy that's going to be the next Burrow, the next Trubisky or whomever, right? The next Kenny Pickett. This time last year, I said it was going to be Phil Jurkovec. I thought Jurkovec was going to sort of emerge as that guy that was going to have the Kenny Pickett-like rise. And he had the wrist injury that sort of set him back, and he struggled when he came back from that. But I'm excited to see things from him this year that maybe we didn't get a chance to see last year because of the injury. Obviously, he's got flowers to throw to, an extremely talented player. Interestingly enough, he spent some time this summer with Tony Rasiopi, Kenny Pickett's quarterback coach. And so I know Tony well. I know Tony's been working with him. I think he's got some of the stuff we talked about with Levis, the under center play action stuff. Read out some pro style concepts a lot and talked to a lot of people this time last year. There was a lot of excitement about Phil Jurkovec and what he could be. Unfortunately, the wrist injury sort of sank his season. And then there's Richardson, who we didn't see a ton of, but watch his LSU game. Like I think you see in that game what he can be over in a course of an entire season. You see the ability to generate explosive plays. You see the ability to attack the entire field, not just with his arm, but with his mind. Like, throw in the third quarter, opens to the right side, a 3-level sort of flood vert concept. That's covered up, so he gets his eyes backside to the sort of slant route that's wide open from the slot. Very good mental approach on that play. Later in the game, fourth quarter, 3-level bunch to the left, another sort of flood type concept that's covered, gets his eyes to the 9 ball on the right side, drops it in for the touchdown. I mean, when you've got the ability as a guy that hasn't had a ton of practice time, hasn't had a ton of experience to step in and make reads and throws and full field decisions like that, then you combine it with what he can do as an athlete and throw it on the move. I'm really excited for Richardson this year.
Now, before we go, a lot of Dolphins fans have questions about Tua Tagovailoa this year. And, what's the best quarterback the Dolphins can draft this season without trading up for a quarterback?
Man, I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on where you end up, because we know that sitting here right now, I'm looking at Tankathon. Again, it's early, but Atlanta 1, Houston 2, Seattle 3. Like I don't know if Atlanta goes quarterback. Having with Ritter in the fold, Houston may or may not. A lot depends on what we see from Davis Mills. I mean, if that's the draft order and Atlanta's fine, you might see Will Anderson at 1. You might see if they don't go quarterback Houston. If that's the order, you might see receiver, tackle. Like you might see something else at 2. Seattle 3. Like those are 3 teams right there that could address quarterback position. You've got Detroit at 5. Like I think Detroit's going to be a little bit better than 5, but again, this is as we're working with it right now. And so right now, it's hard to see Miami, having just forfeited a first round draft pick which will be their first one, I'd bet. At 24, which is where you're currently slotted to pick with that Niners pick. Again, things can move, but in the 20s, maybe Levis. I mean, because I think you look at Young and Stroud, like they're top 5. Like then it sort of shakes out a little bit differently depending on where guys fall. Levis could be in the mix there. McKee could be in the mix there. Jurkovec in the mix there of the guys that we sort of talked about. Maybe some other names that are sort of out there. I'm trying to think of some other guys that could be in that mix there as well. But yeah, I mean, you're probably looking in that sort of like Levis, Richardson, Jurkovec, McKee, that kind of tier. If you trade up, though, I mean, I think whoever gets one of those 2 guys is going to have to trade up to do it.
Of course, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on. Duly appreciate it. We love to have you on during the college football season or even pre-draft.
Whatever you need, man.
Of course, as always, guys, thank you guys for watching, and fins up, everybody.